fellow Americans.
What do you have to say about dictators of countries like Indonesia, who we sell weapons to, yet they are slaughtering people in East Timor? What do you have to say about Israel, who is slaughtering Palestinians, who impose martial law? What do you have to say about that? Those are our allies. Why do we sell weapons to these countries? Why do we support them? Why do we bomb Iraq when it commits similar problems?
There are various examples of things that are not right in this world, and the United States is trying. I really am surprised that people feel that it is necessary to defend the rights of Saddam Hussein, when what we ought to be thinking about is how to make sure that he does not use weapons of mass destruction.
I'd like to...
shouting. Just a moment.
I'm not defending them in the least. What I am saying is that there needs to be consistent application of U.S. foreign policy. We cannot support people who are committing the same violations because they are political allies. That is not acceptable. We cannot violate UN resolutions when it is convenient to us. You're not answering my question, Madam Albright.
You briefed the press, did you not, when you were there?
Well, I had several jobs. One of my jobs was that of analyst. I also was an interrogator and indeed briefed the press when we, the CIA, wanted to circulate disinformation on a particular issue. Disinformation is not necessarily a lie. It may be a half-truth. And we would pick out a journalist. I would go do the briefing and hope that he would put the information in print.
What was your percentage of success?
We were pretty successful in planting information of a rather rarefied nature. For instance, if we wanted to get across to the American public that the North Vietnamese were building up their force structure in South Vietnam, I would go to a journalist and advise him that in the past 6 months, X number of North Vietnamese forces had come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail system through southern Laos. Now, there is no way a journalist can check that information. That's data derived from radio intercepts, spy in the sky photography. So either he goes with the information or he doesn't, and ordinarily or usually the journalist would go with it because it looked like some kind of exclusive. Go after these gentlemen. I would be directed to cultivate them, to spend time with them at the Caravel Hotel or the Continental Hotel, to socialize with them, and slowly but surely to try to gain their confidence by dolloping out valid information which was true. And then I would drop into a conversation the data that we wanted to get across, which might not be true. One piece of data, for instance, that we managed to plant in the New Yorker magazine had to do with a supposed North Vietnamese effort in 1973 to develop airfields along the border of South Vietnam. The reason we wanted to plant this information was that we were trying to persuade the U.S. Congress that Saigon should continue to get a great deal of aid, and that the North Vietnamese were the chief violators of the ceasefire accord. That was printed in the New Yorker magazine under the byline of Robert Chaplin, as indeed was a great deal of such information which we tried to circulate.
Frank, a two-part question. What were the objectives or what was the objective of the CIA? What about the moral implications of what you were doing in feeding disinformation? Did the objective override the moral implications, moral problems?
Well, the objective of the agency in general is to generate intelligence and get it back to Washington, to get at the truth and make sure the policymakers understand it. When you plant disinformation, you are diverging from that objective, and I think probably in retrospect it was very counterproductive. I am, as an ex-CIA agent, opposed to the disinformation activities in which I was involved. I admit that I was involved, and I think it served no useful purpose. Propagandizing the American public or Congress is not the CIA's job. As to the morality of what the CIA was doing or that particular activity, the war was a very relative thing. It was a relativist environment, and morality seldom came into play when you were operating in the field. In my estimation, a CIA man should be amoral. That may sound pretty shocking to somebody, but what if my morality were that of a Nazi or agent, if you will? You wouldn't want me to be your intelligence officer. Keep the morals out of intelligence. Keep the truth in, and stay away from disinformation.
It would have been more appropriate for Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister of Canada, to address this House according to Article 144, an article which was specifically designed to debate violations of human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, which is clearly the case with Mr. Trudeau. Then again, a Prime Minister who openly admires the Chinese basic dictatorship, who tramples on fundamental rights by persecuting and criminalizing his own citizens as terrorists just because they dared to stand up to his perverted concept of democracy should not be allowed to speak in this House at all. Mr. Trudeau, you are a disgrace for any democracy. Please spare us your presence. Thank you.
And it might sound radical, colleagues, but the answer to war is not more war, it's peace. And peace isn't delivered by the barrel of a gun, it's delivered by diplomacy, by dialogue. You can wish away your continent's history, but we share a continent with Russia. We will sit down with Russia. There will be a negotiated peace, and this organisation should be promoting it earlier rather than delaying it and making sure that more Ukrainians die. Your feigning of sympathy rings hollow. It makes me sick, to be honest with you.
Is the US a functioning democracy? Well, let's have a look at it. It costs $2 billion to become president. They have 25% of the total prisoners in the world. They spend over $800 billion a year on arms, which is more than most of the world put together. They've been at war for 250 years since their state was formed 275 years ago. But they can't afford universal health care. They can't afford the $1.7 trillion debt forgiveness for students. They can't afford a programme for the 17 million children that go to bed hungry. Is this a functioning democracy? What's your idea of a democracy?
This is a bit of an aside, but in terms of how you think about problem sets, when I was a cadet, what's the cadet motto at West Point? You will not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. I was the CI director. We lied, we cheated, we stole. It was like we had entire training courses.
We had a good discussion on ensuring global energy security and adequate oil supplies to support global economic growth, and that will begin shortly. I'm doing all I can to increase the supply for the United States of America, which I expect to happen. The Saudis share that urgency, and based on our discussions today, I expect we'll see further steps in the coming weeks.
Are you worried about
become involved when disinformation poses a threat to the security of our country. It is when there's a connectivity to a threat to our country. It could be a threat, a connectivity to violence. And what this working group does, is precisely what I would think you would want it to do, which is to take a look at the work, the disinformation work that our department has done, and ask the following questions. Do we have policies? Do we have guardrails? Do we have standards?
But here's the
to
problem.
ensure-
We can't even agree. We can't even
extremely-
agree what disinformation is.
This is-
You
well-
can't even agree that it was disinformation, that the Russians fed information to the Steele dossier. If you can't agree to that, how are we ever going to come to an agreement on what is disinformation so you can police it on social media?
Senator, I have 2 points, if I may finish. Number one, that what this office, what this working group does, because it's not an office, what this working group does is ensure that there are guardrails, definitions, standards to make sure that the free speech rights, the civil rights, civil liberties, and privacy rights of individuals
So
are
do you
not
think
impinged.
do you think
Number
COVID
one.
do you think
And number
COVID do you think
two,
COVID
if I may.
do you think COVID disinformation threatens our national security?
And number two, if I may, Senator, and number two, is it your proposition that when the cartels spread disinformation with respect to our immigration policies to try to lure vulnerable migrants to our border illegally?
I think you've got no idea what disinformation is, and I don't think the government's capable of it. Do you know who the greatest propagator of disinformation in the history of the world is? The U.S. government. Are you familiar with McNamara, the Pentagon Papers? Are you familiar with George W. Bush and the weapons of mass destruction? Are you familiar with Iran-Contra? I mean, think of all the debates and disputes we've had over the last 50 years in our country. We work them out by debating them. We don't work them out by the government being the arbiter. I don't want you guardrails. I want you to have nothing to do with speech. You think we can't determine, speech by traffickers is disinformation? You think the American people are so stupid they need you to tell them what the truth is? You can't even admit what the truth is with the Steele dossier. I don't trust government to figure out what the truth is. Government is largely disseminating disinformation.
One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough, if they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
You killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war
George,
after
if
what
I
you've
was
already
still in
done.
Parliament,
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Welcome, everybody, to Redacted on this Tuesday. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natalie Morris.
And on this show, we try to cover the stories the mainstream media largely ignores. And if you went around the mainstream media today, you largely got to see them ignoring one of the biggest stories, maybe one of the biggest crimes in American history, which is the release of the Durham Report and what it shows about our intelligence community literally meddling in an election. Not only meddling, perhaps a coup. And why isn't Hillary Clinton being prosecuted? But, the mainstream media is not interested really in covering this story, but we will tonight. We're going to go through this Durham Report, and we're going to look at the fallout, what this means for the future of our country.
Plus, are you drinking a Miller Lite in order to boycott Bud Light? I'm going to ruin that for you and let you know that's not any better if you are trying to consume things that don't have woke ideology.
Might it even be worse?
Oh, yes. Miller Lite says, here's just some of the things I'm going to show you later in their sort of company guidebook, is that because transgender people don't have matching IDs, don't worry about that. Just, let them in bars, let them have their drinks. Don't worry about it.
So when you're checking for, we'll go into all of that, but it's
there's a lot of that. It's kind of crazy.
We were going through Miller Lite's handbook today. This is literally their handbook. And I was like, we were laughing our asses off. I can't believe that a company would do this. So we'll get to that. We're also going to look at Russia unleashing one of the largest barrages of pinpoint strikes over the last few hours on major targets, ammunition depots, etc. in Ukraine. Ukraine saying they shot down all of Russia's missiles. Russia saying, no, you didn't. You didn't even touch our hypersonic missiles. You didn't touch any of it. So we'll get into all of that. And plus what Zelensky has to say about recruitment in Ukraine. He says people are lined up around the block at the doors so that they can join the Ukrainian army. Is that true, or is that more garbage? You tell us. What do you think it is in the chat? Redacted starts right now. Ron in our chat says, can you identify as an adult to get alcohol if you're below a legal age?
This is the thing that I'm concerned about because, I may know some people who used fake IDs before they were of age.
These people.
And some of the things that these people are told to do is memorize the birthday of the person that you are pretending to be, right? And so Miller Lite says, if, this person doesn't have a matching ID, just ask them their birthday. That's how you get around it. We're going to go through their handbook because it's amazing that they're just kind of quietly letting Bud Light suffer in silence and in solitude when they are ideologically aligned. They're happy to reap those profits, though.
Oh, for sure. For sure. They were really hoping that no one would notice. But a lot of people are noticing over the past 24 hours, and we're going to break it all down. We have a daily newsletter, and I haven't really mentioned it. We haven't really mentioned it over the past few days, but we would love for you to sign up for it. It's totally free. It's the greatest newsletter in the world, and we just hit a new record of sign-up. So we've got many, many hundreds of thousands of you who get the newsletter every morning in your inbox. We get the great emails from you back that say this is the best way to start your morning, because it's you can read it in about 5 or 10 minutes, and Natalie and I write it. We work really hard on it. We try to cover like 4 or 5 of the big stories we think that you need to know about for the day. We try to add a little humor to it and all of that. All you need to do is just go to redacted.inc. It's not .com. Put in your email address, and then you'll receive a welcome email from me. You just need to verify your email because, they like to send us to spam. In fact, when we first launched the newsletter, Gmail labeled our newsletter as dangerous because we were telling the truth. Isn't that crazy? That's all. They labeled our newsletter dangerous. So if you want the world's most dangerous newsletter, go to redacted.inc and sign up. And then tomorrow morning on Wednesday, you'll get the newsletter at about 6:30 in the morning Eastern time. That's when we publish it. So anyway, check it out. All right. We've got a lot of news to get to here on the show tonight. So let's kick it off. Let's talk about this Durham report.
Let's do. Because, this is the wrong thing.
I started off?
No.
Okay.
I'm ready.
All right,
I'm ready.
go ahead.
All right. Well, here's a question. Why was Hillary Clinton never prosecuted? The Durham report shows that the reasons that Hillary Clinton is treated differently than Donald Trump are indeed political. I know you're shocked. Now, I'm not the kind of person who ever put a lot of stock into the lock her up chant. But at this point, now that we see in black and white an internal investigation of the FBI, we must wonder, why is one candidate from one political party treated differently? The Durham Report, which was released just yesterday, does indeed show that there are two different standards for different people of power, especially as it relates to the Justice Department. And it is damning. I want to say, I've been thinking about this a lot today. I do think that this report shows to me that the system is still alive, that it's still well-intentioned because of the fact that we have the report at all. There is still a system to say something's not right, let's look into it. And we do, in fact, have a quality report. Will it work? If the FBI stands by what it says about the report, namely that it does show bias in investigations and needs to be fixed. But can they ever really heal it as long as one candidate continues to be prosecuted and one candidate does not? We're still now in the 2016 election looking at what happened and why the fallout continues for one person and not another. And it's real.
Yeah, it's real. I mean, how is she still allowed to go on and sit there on stage at these different events and sort of laugh it up about how this election was, Trump was a criminal? She's still spouting these lies about Russia interference in the election. She's still to this day spouting these lies about it.
Right. When actually the report shows that the FBI was themselves a victim of Russian disinformation, but sort of a willing participant. I'm going to show that to you. Just a little recap. The Durham Report is the finale, if you will, the final report of the special counsel investigation that was commissioned in 2020 by then Attorney General William Barr. And it was given to this man you see here, Special Investigator John Durham. His team was tasked with looking into the FBI investigation of the 2016 election, including they looked over the Mueller report, and they looked specifically at Crossfire Hurricane, which was the FBI investigation looking into the Trump-Russia link. Now, here's one of the main conclusions, and it is damning. I know that's kind of hard to read, but what it says is that the people in charge of putting these investigations on, going forward with them, at a minimum had hostile feelings towards Trump, and then the matter was given full speed ahead at a rate that is not normal for normal investigations. And look at the last paragraph there. It says the speed and manner in which the FBI opened and investigated Crossfire Hurricane during the presidential election season based on raw, unanalyzed, and uncorroborated intelligence also reflected a noticeable departure for how it approached prior matters involving possible attempted foreign election interference plans aimed at the Clinton campaign. Now, you may recall that James Comey had come out in front of the election in 2016 and said, we don't recommend any criminal charges for Hillary Clinton, but she used bad judgment and we're going to refer this over. And he was excoriated for that because people had said you should not have impugned her without giving her her day in court. You've sort of put slime on her, tampered with her reputation without her having the civil right to defend herself. And people disagreed with him actually doing that. It seems like then, there was sort of, they gave her that, I don't know, depending on your camp, you can say they gave her a pass, or you can say they gave her a slam, depending on how you feel about it. But she did not, in fact, have her day in court. Whereas the President Trump, has been screaming all along that the investigations about him were politically motivated and unbased. Here is CNN's Jake Tapper admitting that to a degree is true. It's amazing that CNN aired these on their airwaves. I almost passed away from shock.
Regardless, the report is now here. It has dropped, and it might not have produced everything of what some Republicans hoped for. It is, regardless, devastating to the FBI, and to a degree, it does exonerate Donald Trump.
Wow. It does to a degree.
To a degree.
So what degree, I love people asking, what degree is that exactly? What degree is it that...
Is it a 180?
Is it a 360?
Well, 360, you'd end up where you started. It's a 180.
Is it 180? Is it a 90 degree angle? What degree? To what degree? It does to a degree.
Right.
More of a 720, like a 720 because they're spinning.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he short-circuited the bot that was Jake Tapper.
Yeah.
Short-circuited because he said something that he really did not want to say. Okay, now to this degree, not only does this show that every time there was an opportunity to investigate Donald Trump, the agency just hopped to, it also showed that the agency had intel on Hillary Clinton's plan to use this Trump-Putin-Russia link, and they decided to drop it. Here is where that's laid out, and I'd like to read it to you because I think it's important. It says, these examples are markedly different from the FBI's actions with respect to other highly significant intelligence it received from a trusted foreign source, pointing to a Clinton campaign plan to vilify Trump by using him to Vladimir Putin so as to divert attention from her own concerns relating to her use of a private email server. Unlike the FBI's opening of a full investigation of unknown members of the Trump campaign based on raw, uncorroborated information, in this separate matter involving a purported Clinton campaign plan, the FBI never opened any type of inquiry, issued any taskings, employed any analytical personnel, or produced any analytical products in connection with the information. This lack of action was despite the fact that the significance of the Clinton plan intelligence was such to have prompted the director of the CIA to brief the president, vice president, attorney general, director of the FBI, and other senior government officials about it within days of its receipts. Well, who was the president at the time who was briefed on this plan?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama was told by the CIA and the FBI, Hillary Clinton's about to, the Clinton campaign is about to do this, drag through the mud. And, in this dragging of the mud, we're going to pick up Russia and Vladimir Putin.
Yeah. So just think about this. John Brennan, who's now working at MSNBC, right?
Uh-huh.
So John Brennan, he's the guy that went on the air a number of months ago, and when they asked him who was responsible for the Nord Stream pipeline bombing, he said it was clearly Russia. John Brennan, right, the former head of the CIA, he's in this meeting with Barack Obama, basically admitting to a coup, like this involvement in a coup of the United States. A sitting president of the United States colluding with intelligence and the attorney general.
They were at the very least briefed on it.
Yeah. Okay. What, you do nothing about it?
And they did nothing.
And they did nothing about it. So you're the acting director of the CIA, and someone comes in and says they're going to make up a story in order to throw the election. And you're like, all right, I'm going to go get some lunch.
Well,
that
guess
sounds like
who
a plan.
else knew about this at the time? The vice president. Who was vice president at the time? The current president.
The current president.
So he, too,
this is a
was
coup.
briefed.
What else is it? This is a coup.
Well, okay. They're told, we have intel that the Clinton campaign may be doing this. They are close to the Clinton campaign. They could say, we better stop them, or maybe tell them not to do that, or maybe continue to investigate if they're going to do that. But instead, as a full investigation blooms around Trump, they let this one slide. Now, again, here we know that at least the FBI knew about this smear campaign, and they ran it all the way up the flagpole. But a smear campaign in and of itself is not illegal. And they address this early in the brief. They say, that's legal. You can use bad judgment.
By who, though? Who's doing the smearing? I mean,
right. So when we come
is it legal? Sorry, is it legal that the intelligence community and the attorney general are going to smear a political candidate? Like that falls under. That's the problem with this. As people are asking in the chat, they're like, we know this now, but like, what next? Is this illegal?
Yes. You can smear anybody with any kind of lies. Yes, you can. I can say that you had an affair with the president of Antarctica. Okay. Is there even a president of Antarctica?
No, there's not.
That's why I say that.
That's a lie.
I can say that. I can, but if I go to a government agency and say, Clayton's having an affair with the president of Antarctica.
Okay, let's not use this as an example.
Why? It's
because I love Antarctica.
Stupid. Okay. And then I say, I'm going to give evidence so that some investigation happens. I'm lying. I'm giving false evidence. That is illegal. You can smear all you want. You can say stupid things to the press. You can get the press on their side. They absolutely did that. But then when it comes to like giving false evidence, and in fact, one FBI attorney has been prosecuted from this investigation for falsifying documents that led to Crossfire Hurricane. So what we, the people, should want to know is who knew what when, who handed information directly, because it did go through Clinton lawyers, Clinton campaign lawyers, and did they pass on knowingly false information to government investigators in order to smear Donald Trump as a way to boost their own campaign? We are owed that. What we only know is that they knew, they did it on purpose, and that the FBI let it drop. What we don't know is why they don't pick it back up and why they were never prosecuted. Some other things that I think worth looking into. The documents show that the Clinton campaign hired a law firm to push the Steele dossier towards an investigation of Donald Trump. Steele and the FBI relied heavily on one source for this, Igor Danchenko. Here's a picture of that dude. The report shows that the FBI had made errors about his travel, where he lived. They knew that he had changed his statements from one person to the next, year to year, but they never accounted for that. And then they sort of decided, despite these holes in his profile, to pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars to be a source for information, which is interesting because he had been under investigation between the years of 2009 and 2011, and they thought that he might have been offering to sell classified information. They closed that investigation when they incorrectly believed he'd returned to Russia. So here is what Durham Report concludes about him, is that equally important is the fact that in not resolving Danchenko's status vis-a-vis the Russian intelligence service, it appears the FBI never gave appropriate consideration to the possibility that the intelligence Danchenko was providing to Steele, which again, according to Danchenko himself, made up a significant majority of the information in the Steele reports, was in part or in whole Russian disinformation. So this is so rich that the government is telling us all the time to be aware of Russian disinformation when they themselves have fallen victim to it by someone they were paying. So we need to watch out for Russian disinformation, but when they've got a Russian who's deliberately doing that and there's holes in their profile, they pay him.
Yeah, with taxpayer dollars.
With taxpayer dollars.
So that's the problem. You guys funded this. Like everyone watching right now funded this. Can you believe it?
Well, yes.
Your tax dollars went to this. Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, to back up your claim, too, about the coup, do you remember that in 2020, there was a Time article, The Secret History of the Shadow Campaign That Saved the 2020 Election?
No.
Do you remember that article that talked about how deep that went, money-wise and all that stuff, to basically a coup, like you said? It's exactly how it feels and looks.
I mean, what else is it? Can anyone else name what this is? Do you guys let me know in the chat what you think this is? I think it's a coup. I don't know how else you could frame it.
It feels to me like a bait and switch. Like she put out fake information. The FBI, based on internal biases, picked it up because that's what they wanted. Because, Trump was an undesirable candidate.
Led by having meetings in President Obama's office, right?
Yes.
Your candidate of choice, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama's candidate of choice, Hillary Clinton, maybe not actually his selection of choice, but he was,
He had already made a deal with the devil.
Right.
Yes.
So in the office where this happened, and you've got the AG, you've got the head of the CIA, the FBI colluding, taking this bait and running with it, knowing that this was coming out and they're going to run with it. With zero evidence.
There is a possibility that that the president and his staff are briefed on this and they're like, oh, hopefully the FBI takes that one on, and then they don't follow up, because there is supposed to be this separation of the criminal justice system from the executive office. So we're not saying that then he was like, oh, okay, hopefully the FBI doesn't investigate that and then goes after Trump. We're not saying that, and we shouldn't say that because we don't know.
Right. Well, we weren't in the room, but I'm just saying.
But that does not a coup make.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead. Who was trying to talk?
Well,
yeah, Philip, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so pointing out that not only were they like being briefed on this, but it's also she was the former Secretary of State.
Yes.
For that administration. So it's like, if nothing else, it just shows deep cronyism because, what they're willing to do for their I don't know, friends, I guess.
Right. And you might be able to say, don't do that. That could be illegal, right? I mean, she should know. She was a high-performing lawyer.
And this is the question then. What laws were broken, and what prosecutions should be coming down the pike because of this?
Well, we see at least one FBI lawyer who falsified evidence for the investigation has been prosecuted. But we're not told how much the Clinton campaign pushed for this story that they made up. We don't know that yet. And yet, Donald Trump has been impeached for simply indicating to Zelensky that he'd like Joe Biden to be investigated. And Democrats called that a political campaign of asking a foreign head of state for a favor, for a political favor.
And this all comes after Joe Biden, then Vice President Biden, said on camera that he went to Ukraine and had them fire the prosecutor.
Yes.
He called up President Obama and had him fire the prosecutor. So he's on camera admitting to it.
Yes.
So this is when Biden did that. And then they wanted to look into why.
I mean, that's a whole other ball of wax. Why didn't the FBI pick that one up? Why didn't the CIA pick that one up? Why was it on Trump to sort of suggest it? Right. We're not given that. Now he's been indicted for what is being called campaign finance misconduct for paying a woman he had an affair with, Stormy Daniels. He's punished for both things because they say it influenced elections. And yet Hillary Clinton created and led an investigation to influence an election and nothing. This is mobster stuff. Right. And the report is full of sad errors and omissions that just shouldn't happen in a competent and unbiased organization. For instance, Michael Flynn, who was dragged through the mud as a major person of interest in the Trump campaign, he's now suing the Justice Department for what he says they did to his family and his life. This is going to be major fodder for that lawsuit, obviously, if he's going to be able to show you had so little on me, but you came at me full force because I was associated with Trump. Recall that he was pardoned by Trump. Also, here's a little interesting tidbit. He was fired by Obama after he tried to help Germany target al-Nusra in Syria. When the Obama administration wanted to help the al-Qaeda faction of al-Nusra, Michael Flynn actually wanted to take on Islamic extremism and this al-Qaeda faction, and he passed intelligence to Germany in order to actually help the Syrians, and he was fired for that. So already he was on the shit list of Hillary Clinton because, as we've established, she wanted that war in Syria for her reelection, and the war in Libya as well. So again, you see how this works out. One party and not the next, right? So what's the FBI's response to this? Well, here's what they said to Fox News. They said, yeah, this is bad stuff. We know, and we fixed it already. Here's their quote. The conduct in 2016 and 2017 that Special Counsel Durham examined was the reason the current FBI leadership already implemented dozens of corrective actions, which have now been in place for some time. Had those reforms been in place in 2016, the missteps identified in this report could have been prevented. This report reinforces the importance of ensuring the FBI continues to do the work with rigor, objectivity, and professionalism that we all deserve. Okay, they say they've already fixed these problems. This would not happen in the year 2023, right? But then you can fix it by actually investigating everything, right? If we're going to have the investigation of Trump, we deserve an investigation, a real one that never happened, of Hillary Clinton. You could sort of say statute of limitations, but recall that Trump is being indicted for something where the statute of limitations have already passed. He was tried for grape without the G. In the Jean Carroll case, that was past his statute of limitations, but they allowed her to change the statute of limitations in order to sue him. So the statute of limitations, is that okay for one person and not the next? We're just wondering. And then as this all unravels, there's one thing that Aaron Mate brought up that I thought was a good point, and I did not see it as I went through this, is where's the whole Clinton camp was hacked by Russiagate. Look at this tweet. Durham Report underscores all this stuff, all this, lack of collusion that Trump was talking about. But he doesn't touch Russiagate's core allegation, which the Clinton camp also generated, and the FBI and the media parroted, which is the alleged Russian hacking of the DNC.
Oh, right.
So what happened there? I guess that's just, the report is over 300 pages. I have not read it in its entirety. I spent a long time today before my eyes crossed. But yeah, that's not one of them. It's just one of those things where it's like, this is something, we let them run away with it. We don't know what they found. I do think that I'm happy to see this report. I'm happy that it exists, that I'm happy that it was done. I'm encouraged that the FBI says we won't, let this happen again, but I'm not encouraged that there's just one lawyer passed along false information and got prosecuted and nobody else.
Presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy this morning says that they need to disband the FBI. As president, he would disband it. RFK Jr. has already said that as well about the CIA and the FBI. Senator Josh Hawley calls for the end of the FBI today as well. Sitting members of Congress calling for the end of the FBI. It won't matter, though. They get rid of the FBI. It's a hydra. It'll just pop up in other ways. The deep state exists.
Yeah, I think we all owe it to ourselves to think about, how lawless we already are in the United States and what might happen without the FBI. That's a scary thought. I don't know. Is that really the answer? And what happens next?
I was just going to say really quick, if this happens, if the FBI is like, okay, we're going to turn things around, it would be the first government or agency that is open and transparent. Like, it'd be the only one. So how could they exist in all this other corruption with all these other agencies and everything? It just wouldn't make sense.
Well, I mean, okay, they're hot right now on politically motivated investigations, right? They're going full board against Trump. And they went full board against anyone associated with Trump for a long time. So are they going to say like, ooh, let's cool that for a while? I mean, that we shouldn't want that either. We should want a point that Phillips brought up many times. We should want everybody looked out for all their bad stuff. Period. Unbiased way, right? Everybody should get that. That's not what we had, at least in 2016.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And then a lot of people in the chat saying, well, the FBI will just turn into the IRS, which they already in many ways are. So,
Well, we've already got the Department of Homeland Security, so they'll just become DHS. And then
you guys are all being super pessimistic.
They're not going to go away.
I think, at this point, I'm like, I'm so happy to see this. This is how I feel about it. Like, my gosh,
I love that you're suddenly,
the system working. Like, somebody is putting checks and balance on corruption and putting it out there. The media doesn't give a crap.
Where's the balance, though? That's the question. Like, where are we going to see a slew of prosecutions as a result of this? It's like when we go through the 2000s.
Or will we see a slowing of Republican prosecutions?
What does that mean? Oh, you mean of them being prosecuted?
Well, they're like, one side we got our foot on the gas and the other side we got our foot on the brakes. So let's do that, right? And take our foot off the gas of Republican. I don't know. Like, we shouldn't want that to happen. We should want, equal protection under the law. No. And also, yeah, what? Go ahead.
No, I was going to wait till you finish your thought. Donald Trump today called it the greatest crime in American history. Well, let us know your thoughts on this. Do you think it's the greatest crime in American history? I mean, I guess arguably next to the assassination of JFK as a sitting president of the United States, and we know the collusion there with the deep state. So,
and it's being referred to Congress. So could Congress then pick up an impeachment for post for Joe Biden?
I know he was in the meeting.
He clearly.
He was in the meeting. He was definitely a part of it. I mean, there's a laundry list of things that Biden could be impeached for right now. Maybe this is even like, I was just in the meeting. There's a lot more on that list, but we'll see. Let us know your thoughts on this in the comments below. We're going to look at the very latest on Ukraine and Vladimir Putin unleashing a massive assault, hitting multiple ammunition targets. A lot of these NATO ammunition, they show up and then Putin destroys them. So this was one of the largest attacks. And we actually have a pretty big update on a massive attack earlier this afternoon, which might have been the largest number of Ukrainians killed to date. We're going to give you the update on that. That's coming from a source this afternoon. So we'll get there in just a moment. But first, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Moomoo, because right now, if you're an investor looking for an easier way to trade some stocks and you'd like 20 free stocks, with Moomoo, my favorite trading platform, there's no steep learning curve. It has a simple interface. It's easy to use, so even beginners can take advantage of the stock market in no time. There's a couple of stocks that I was actually buying this afternoon. And it's super easy to use. It's so easy. It's intuitive. It has powerful tools often reserved for experienced investors, like customizable watch lists, advanced charting capabilities, and now Moomoo even has added powerful new earnings calendar. So you don't have to hunt and peck trying to find earnings schedules for your favorite companies. Moomoo has zero commission trades, and the app looks amazing on every platform, from iOS to Android to Windows and Mac. Moomoo can help you trade with its advanced tools like their stock screener and their earnings calendar. And right now, for a limited time, if you use that URL, which is redacted.inc/Moomoo, they're giving away 20 free stocks when you open your account and make your initial deposits. That's 20 free stocks when you open your account and make your initial deposits. So all you need to do is go to redacted.inc/Moomoo. That's MOOMOO. Again, that's redacted.inc/Moomoo. Well, a few hours ago, Russia unleashed a massive airstrike on Ukraine. The country of Hungary is pissed that Ukraine planned to blow up its own pipeline to Russia. And the U.S., UK, and Germany plan to funnel billions more in weapons to Ukraine. And Rishi Sunak gave a big hug to Zelensky yesterday in the United Kingdom. So all of this money, all of this weapons, will it change anything? And what happened overnight? We will get to all of that with Colonel Douglas Macgregor to give us his analysis and insights. Colonel, great to see you, my friend. Welcome back to the show.
Sure, great to see you.
So let's talk about what happened overnight first, just the strategy, the tactics of what unfolded overnight with Putin launching a barrage of attacks. Reports are that this was a devastating attack from on the Ukrainian side. Ukrainians, though, saying they shot down all of it. Even 6 Kinzhal missiles, the hypersonic missiles. So Ukraine says, don't worry, we got it all taken care of. Russia says they all struck and hit their targets. So what do you make of this latest barrage targeting the capital?
Well, keep in mind that your intercontinental ballistic missiles are also hypersonic. So you're talking about missiles that fly 25 to 35,000 feet per second. We can't shoot down ICBMs. No one can shoot down a hypersonic missile. I just think it's absurd to even suggest that these Kinzhal missiles, which are hypersonic, could have been shot down. So I tend to think the Russians are telling the truth. They hit the targets. Now, I realize that people want to sort of compartmentalize these various strikes that happen over several days, but it's a mistake to do that. You have to look at the larger strategic purpose of these strikes. They've been focused almost entirely on ammunition storage points. They've been looking for the new weaponry that's come in, like your Shadow missiles, Patriots, and so forth. And they've hit several places where those missiles were located and they've been destroyed. We think they destroyed a Patriot battery near Kiev. So if that's true, and I think it is, the notion that the Ukrainians were able to stop much of anything, I think, is ridiculous. They just don't have much left in terms of air defense. So they've been destroying air defense now for a long time, which is essentially making Ukraine vulnerable to airstrikes and air attack. And the Russians have been fairly successful. There was one attempt over the last few days to enter Russian territory by a Ukrainian special operations force. And they did manage with Stingers to down a couple of Russian aircraft, fighter bombers, and a couple of helicopters were lost. So people are declaring victory on the basis of that one-off good luck. They also managed over the last few days to take an abandoned, ruined farm complex on the edge of some woods within the 20 to 25 kilometer security zone in front of Russian defensive lines on the southern end down near Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, down in that region. And of course, that was hailed as a great victory because these were reconstituted Azov troops. They'd taken such heavy casualties, they had to be completely rebuilt from scratch. The truth is, those are not terribly meaningful because when you look at the entire front line, Ukrainians, once again, have lost thousands of people. hundreds of tanks and armored fighting vehicles. They're not making any progress. They're simply losing more equipment and people they can't afford to lose. And up near Kiev, they hit very important soft spots that were targeted and blown to smithereens. I mean, if you've seen any of the videos, you can see the rather dramatic explosions. And what this tells you is that Russian intelligence is excellent. The Russians know exactly where all of the new weaponry is located, new concentrations of armor from Germany, the United States, Great Britain. These things are being destroyed long before they actually reach the battlefield.
That's the most amazing part, right? They're winding up in these warehouses. We showed the alleged, depleted uranium stockpiles that were hit over the weekend on our show yesterday, and other ammunition depots with these precision strikes. So we keep sending billions of dollars. We keep sending all of these Patriot batteries and all of these other things that are getting blown up the moment they arrive. And now reports this morning that with these upgraded missiles, Ukraine is preparing to strike the Russian heartland, according to the Libertarian Institute today. They said that with these Shadow missiles and, of course, these HIMARS rocket systems that have been arriving and the additional tanks and now pushing for fighter jets, these things arrive, but they're, to your mind, basically being destroyed once they're being collected there.
A lot of them are. Some have gotten through. They did fire 2 of these Shadow missiles into an area where there were 2 buildings inside the Russian defensive structure down in southern Ukraine. They destroyed the 2 buildings. What was in them, we're not entirely sure about. Did they kill some Russians? They certainly did. But you have to view this kind of thing from the vantage point of what's the whole picture?
Right.
What's the damage to the Russians versus the damage to the Ukrainians? And again, the damage to the Ukrainians is unrecoverable. It's catastrophic. It's disastrous. The damage on the Russian side is really quite modest. I mean, if this were a war like World War II, no one would even report these events on the news. They're so insignificant in the context of the larger military equation. But we're not dealing with a realistic appraisal coming out of the mainstream media. We're dealing with a mainstream media that's quite desperate now to try and take any evidence for any advance or any success and exaggerate it out of all proportion to reality. So we have to understand that. In the meantime, they're not telling you about the thousands of dead and wounded Ukrainians, the destruction of, 30 tanks here, 40 other armored vehicles there. This kind of thing goes unreported and unnoticed in the West, but it's really quite devastating to the Ukrainians. And we still continue to see evidence that the energy grid is almost annihilated. It still has some energy in Ukraine, but not much. I mean, they're essentially turning the lights out on the country, to put it bluntly.
Vladimir Zelensky this weekend on his Whirlwind World Tour. He's not been back to Ukraine since that attack on the Kremlin. So he's been going around trying to raise money in different locations. During a television interview, he said that I guess he was specifically asked about videos maybe that have emerged, of course, of these recruitment efforts where they're going out and rounding up military-age men and just dragging them to serve. He said what you're not seeing is that there's long lines at all of these recruitment centers, that young men are just lining up to become a part of the Ukrainian military. He said this in an interview, and I don't know what he's talking about. Is there any truth at all to this, that these people would be going willingly and standing in line at these recruitment centers to fill up the ranks again?
Well, he's absolutely right. We're not seeing it because it's not happening. There were plenty of volunteers a year ago. There's no question about that. Most of them are dead. So you're having enormous problems now dragging people to the front to fight. Wow. Not only is their life expectancy low and they don't have much training and they don't have much equipment and they have bad leadership, but the war itself in Ukraine is no longer the popular event that it was for the first 90 to 120 days. People now are saying, what are we doing? The country's destroyed. What are we defending? Look around. Look at the cities. Look at the people. And again, we're back to how many millions of people have left? 2 million went east into Russia. Perhaps 10 million plus went west. We had a 34.5 million population in February of 2022. Now we're hearing people that say it could be lower than 18 million. It might be down to 14 or 15 million. This thing is a disaster. Anyone in their right mind would end this. Anyone who cared about the Ukrainian people would say stop and then say we've got to negotiate. We are not going to get everything we want, but we have to have an end to this. We can't survive it. But I think his masters, who are obviously not the Ukrainian people, but in Washington and New York City and London and so forth, the financial gurus, the oligarchs, they want this war prosecuted to the bitter end. Remember something else, too. This war is now becoming a financial war. You have the St. Petersburg Forum next week or next month in June. They're expecting 81 nations to come in there. The purpose of this forum is to consolidate support for the emergence of new currency in the non-Western world. In other words, getting out from under the U.S. financial system. And everyone is showing up and they're going to be told, listen, get out of your current U.S. holdings. And what are these countries holding? They're holding U.S. treasuries. All of those treasuries were bought when the interest rates were very low. Now the interest rates are going very high. So those holdings are toxic. It's the same problem we have with our domestic banking system. So these people are showing up and they're going to support this gold-backed system because most of the gold right now is in the hands of China, Russia, India, probably Saudi Arabia. I don't know how much gold is under the streets of London anymore. I don't know how much gold is really in New York City under the streets in Manhattan. We just don't know. But we're talking about gold-based transactions becoming the norm. Where does that leave us? We're entirely fiat currency. We're not prepared to go to gold-backed currency.
No, in fact, we're going the opposite. We're going to a central bank digital currency, even worse.
Yeah, exactly. So this is kind of a financial war, and Putin is watching the meltdown in the United States. Now, some people are saying, well, this banking crisis that we have is temporary. And it's only a few banks here or there, even though we've had the largest bank failure in U.S. history within the last couple of months. I think it's systemic, and I think most people in the know believe it's systemic. What happens when they, too, try to drop these or sell these toxic assets, these U.S. treasuries that are no longer of any value? How do we survive that? I don't know. In other words, we're looking at everything from, what is it, hyperinflation, total debasement of our currency, to what? Default? I mean,
and that's what we're headed to this afternoon. Yeah, the update this afternoon from Kevin McCarthy, Speaker of the House, is that right now President Biden is negotiating in bad faith, and he says we may stumble into default in the same way that our southern border has been widened opened. Default seems to be on the table right now.
So if you're Vladimir Putin and this enormous organization that started out as the so-called BRICS is now adding to that original number of 5 or 6, 81 nation states around the world, what do? Well, you wait. You exercise some patience because your principal opponent, which is Washington, may well be unable to sustain operations much longer in Ukraine. Because if you do have to cut spending, and at some point that's going to become unavoidable, what do people in Washington cut first? Defense. And what's the easiest thing to cut? Forces and equipment and people overseas. So I think Putin is watching for that. At the same time, a German general reported last week that when you look at Ukraine from above, it looks like the Great Lakes, Erie, Huron, Michigan, and so forth. In other words, there's been so much water. That has to dry up. That should be gone by June, maybe the beginning, maybe the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. When that's gone and the ground is dry, then the real offensive can begin. And right now, Putin and his forces have been acting like a heavyweight champion that only uses a left jab. In other words, he's jabbing with all of these strikes and doing enormous damage. He hasn't let loose his right, which are hundreds of thousands of Russian combat troops. So the future doesn't look good if you're sitting in Kiev, if you're Ukrainian right now. Does that make any difference to people in Washington? Yes, but what can they do? They can double down.
And that's what, if you're in the Pentagon, if you're in the Pentagon, back in the Pentagon advising the president, can you imagine that? President Biden calls you up to get some advice. And that would be amazing. But shine some actual honesty and truth into that Pentagon. But to be able to walk in there and to say, so you're about to launch a new tranche of weapons and a new round of aid package to Ukraine. That's what's on the table. Colonel, what do you think of this plan? Here, this is the plan from the president. This is what we're putting on the table for the president of the United States. What do you say about this?
It will not rescue Ukraine from imminent defeat. The best thing we can do is cut our losses and get out, and urge the Ukrainians to sue for peace. Tell them that we'll help them as much as we can, but they're going to have to take the best deal that they can get. I mean, stop and consider, if we had told Zelensky in February or March, okay, this is enough, the Russians are going to react very negatively if we do not negotiate with them. If we don't negotiate, they're going to do what they did, which is call a halt, call up reserves, expand the force, double down on industrial production. All these factories are producing 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all sorts of weapons and equipment. So instead of waiting for that to happen, which our intelligence should have told the president and told everybody in the administration was going to happen, should have said, look, it's time to stop. We need to negotiate. We'll do the best we can for you. Ukraine would probably have gotten away with virtually everything that they wanted, except those 2 autonomous provinces in the east. They would have said, okay, we'll cede those or grant them autonomy. We'll give equal rights to Russians in eastern Ukraine. We'll recognize Crimea. Well, in retrospect, right now, that would be a tremendous deal, especially if it came with neutrality. And they threw it away.
Yeah.
Washington threw it away. What will the Russians give us now? Well, I can think of the middle finger, but not much else. I think the Russians are going to nail us to the cross financially as well as militarily. And there's not a whole lot we can do about it. I mean, you got an army you can't recruit for. And if you're going to fight the Russians in Ukraine, you'd better have 600,000-700,000 troops that you could put on the ground to fight. We don't have it. Doesn't exist.
An awful idea. And yeah, we were right there. They were negotiating peace. They were negotiating this discussion until the United States and the UK stuck their nose in and said not to stop these peace talks in Turkey. So who do they have to blame for this? The lack of peace talks. It's Washington. There's
no
London.
miracle on the Dnieper coming. In other words,
Right.
There's not going to be a miracle on the Dnieper. And you've got an admiral out in PACOM, now called Indo-PACOM, for reasons that make no sense to me. Why we would have any interest in the Indian Ocean is beyond me, but that's the way we think. So we have this thing we call Indo-PACOM. I guess it flatters our vanity. And this Admiral Aquilino just a couple of weeks ago testified that, oh no, what's happening in Ukraine has not harmed us in the Pacific in any way. And I'm confident that we're still the only global power in the world that can fight multiple wars. And I'm confident we can do what we have to with China and take care of Russia too. I mean, listen to the lunacy. He's essentially implying that we could fight a 2-front war. He's out of his mind. And if you compare that to Japan, remember that Japan in 1941 had an economy that was 10% the size of the United States. China has an economy that rivals us or is larger. And on top of that, you have Russia, which is now a huge military power. They have the largest military establishment, largest and most well-equipped and well-trained army right now than they've had since the early 80s. Jeez. So it's not a problem. If we have to fight a 2-front war, don't worry about it, Jeff. Don't worry about it. Send me more money. I'll do a better job. It's insane. We're living in la-la land. And Americans, they're not paying attention. Because what are they worried about? Understandably, they're worried about inflation. They're worried about sustaining themselves, earning income. We have stagnant income right now. We've had that for years. Things are getting worse with each passing day. We have no rule of law at home, widespread corruption and criminality in our cities. Our borders are open. Millions of people are pouring in, and they're being offered benefits that are better than those that are available for our own citizens. So the question is, Americans, when are you going to put a stop to this? And it's only going to stop, I'm afraid, when the standard of living drops through the floor. And I think that's coming. I can't predict when, but it's hard to look at all of these problems that we've got financially, economically, socially, militarily, not expect something to fall apart.
Peter Schiff over the past 24 hours says we are facing the second Great Depression. And it's hard to see. It's hard to see for a lot of people, perhaps, the implications of that, but all the pieces are there, and all of the pieces are coming together for an absolute disaster that the United States is facing, and it's all self-inflicted. That's the
But
really
if you
sad
go on,
part.
if you go on cable news, they'll tell you that we might experience a recession in the first quarter of 2024.
Mm-hmm. Right. Are they talking about Wall Street? Are they talking about the wealthy? Because middle America, middle class, which has been squeezed and decimated, and you can tie a direct link between the sanctions that we placed on Russia and the starving of the American people at the hands of what we're doing in Ukraine. It's a direct line. It's really a direct line and self-inflicted. Colonel, great to see you. Great to see you as always. Thank you for this, and we'll be watching what happens at the first few weeks of June as the lands dry up there as well, and we'll also be watching this next tranche of weapons arrive in Ukraine and then be blown up 48 hours later. Colonel, great to see you as always. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks. Bye-bye.
And thanks, Colonel. We really appreciate it. And just reading some of the comments here just now, Parabellum Prepper, I saved this one here while the Colonel was talking, said, let's see if Redacted, this is in our chat, in our YouTube chat, Parabellum Prepper says, let's see if Redacted comes back and admits that they and the Colonel are wrong in a few months, laughing out loud. I would be happy to. I would, yeah. So in a few months, what's a few months, guys? Let me know in the chat, like 3 months?
2 or 3.
And what exactly are we going to admit to that was wrong? Like what? I'm just curious.
You know, we said we didn't think that Russia was going to actually move into Ukraine, and that we were wrong about that, and we said so.
Yeah.
There have been things we were wrong.
No,
about
I'm not saying
before,
what have
like,
we. Oh, yeah, we say, you know.
Lots
but
of things.
What we're saying is, I don't know what. All I'm asking is, what have we just said just now that we will be wrong in 3 months about?
That there are currently people signing up in the war in Ukraine.
I guess.
Or if
David, do you
we
guys
see
know?
proof of
Anybody?
that? I don't
Philip,
know.
Any ideas that we? Just trying to think of like what we would have just in this interview would have said that we would come back 3 months from now and say that we were wrong about that.
Well, we hope that we're wrong in that Western leaders refuse peace talks. We
Right.
hope that they prove us wrong and go tomorrow.
Yes, so we would love peace
That would be
talks.
great. We'd love to be wrong about that.
The Colonel.
Maybe we were wrong about. I was gonna say maybe we were wrong about when the water will dry up. Maybe it won't.
Oh
be
yeah,
June, maybe it'll be July.
That's right. So there's a lot of water on the ground in Ukraine, and the Colonel said probably maybe the first week, second week, the water might dry up, and that's when the massive offensive would begin from the part of the Russians. So maybe the water will dry up in July. So
I can't not sing the Boys to Men song.
I don't know this song.
Let's not wait till the water runs dry. No.
See,
She might
Parabellum
watch our
Prepper,
lives
this is what
pass
you've
us
wrought.
by.
No, please stop. Can we cut?
We don't even talk anymore.
Please stop.
We don't even know what we're.
Okay, we've got more news to get to here on this. Oh, it's so painful. Painful.
You said water runs dry.
I know.
That means Boys to Men. If we get a copyright strike for that when it's just me singing, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I think we could fight that one pretty easily.
Yeah.
We might win that one.
Yeah. So we haven't, since the beginning of this war, since this war has unfolded, what our experts have been pointing out has been unfolding, has been largely accurate. Of course, you've seen like some holdouts in Bakhmut. Oh, I should mention actually, let me just pull this up because we got this note this afternoon and I wanted to bring it to our attention that this afternoon, according to sources, according to one of the NATO officers who provided headquarters support for counterattacks on the flanks of May 12th, said Ukraine suffered one of the biggest losses since 2014. 1,725 people were killed in this attack on the strikes. The strikes of the 2nd Azov Brigade on the southern flank and the 2 mechanized brigades and 1 motorized rifle battalion. Again, this is from NATO, saying that the Russian artillery, tanks, and aircraft on the line at high altitudes led to these heavy losses. Large number of foreign mercenaries. So you might start hearing about these in different countries as well. In different countries who went to fight in there as well. That Russian tanks, far right groups are stuck in Bakhmut right now. The armed forces of Ukraine have been trying for several days to ease the pressure on the group so that it can be withdrawn. but they've been hitting them with massive bombardments. So that's the latest on that. Anyway, there you go.
All right. Well, should we switch to beer now? We're going to talk about Miller Lite in a second. We're going to talk about central bank digital currency, all of that. Do you need a minute?
No, I'm ready. I want to talk. Let's talk about Miller Lite. Let's talk about it.
Because your knowledge of the Boyz II Men collection is lacking, and you will be subject to this later tonight.
Oh, please. Oh my God.
You will be serenaded.
I'm a Philly boy. I know my Boyz II Men enough. All right.
Well, if you think you're sticking it to Bud Light by having a Miller Lite, you're not. Miller Lite wants bars to have gender-neutral bathrooms, gender-neutral uniforms, and get rid of ID requirements for transgender people. Just wait till you see this. It is written out. So you may just have to drink water because another beer company has proved itself to be manipulating the social agenda for something you may or may not want and may or may not have voted for. We've spoken at length about how Bud Light has been weathering an awful plunge in sales since partnering with transgender social media user Dylan Mulvaney to celebrate 365 days of womanhood. Now, over the weekend, Bud Light was mocked for this kind of sad coupon on store shelves saying, please buy me. Please.
You get $20 back. We're going to literally, you buy this and you will get the case for free. That's how bad they're trying to.
I think it's a rebate of some sort. I did not scan it. But yes, people are saying that's kind of pathetic and sad. Now, sales of Bud Light and other Anheuser-Busch products fell 26% towards the end of April. Now, interestingly enough, sales of Coors Light were up 13% and Miller Lite up 13%. So Miller Lite is happy to collect on the spoils of Bud Light while saying nothing. Well, why have they said nothing? Some brands are sort of doubling down and saying, hey, we don't push gender ideology on you. We're just a beer. Here's our beer. We're not doing this. Miller Lite is just kind of quietly existing and cashing in. But they really can't because they too have been participating in stakeholder capitalism. And I'm going to show it to you with a big fat emphasis on gender ideology. Stakeholder capitalism is when a company says that it is going to make decisions in the best interest of everyone and not just shareholders. We should not want that if you want to live in a democracy. You should not want powerful and rich people and companies setting the social agenda for you. I don't want that anyway. It is a perversion of democracy. Now, Miller was called out recently for a commercial that I'm about to show you, but it goes much deeper than that, and I'm going to show that to you too. Hold on, because I'm going to show you some stuff. My friends, I'm going to show you some stuff. So here's the ad that was released in March before Bud Light had their woman face can.
Here's a little known fact. Women were among the very first to brew beer ever. From Mesopotamia to the Middle Ages to colonial America, women were the ones doing the brewing. Centuries later, how did the industry pay homage to the founding mothers of beer? They put us in bikinis. Wow. Look at this wild. It's time beer made it up to women. So today, Miller Lite is on a mission to clean up not just their but the whole beer industry's Miller Lite has been scouring the internet for all this and buying it back so that they can turn it into good for women brewers. Literally, good How, you ask? Ladies, take it away.
First, we turn the bad into compost. Then we feed compost to worms. Push out beautiful fertilizer.
That good helps farmers grow quality hops, which is then donated to women brewers to make their own really good
But there's definitely more out there. In your attic, in the garage, in your parents' basement. Send any you got into Miller Lite and they'll turn that into good too. Oh. So here's to women, because without us, there would be no beer.
That was super fun.
So Max Master in our chat says, blah, blah, stop nagging. Yeah, that's exactly what this ad was, nagging.
It's condescending for many reasons.
Yes.
For starters, the claims that women have been brewing beer for longer than men Well, the ancient Egyptians were the first to brew beer, and it was more like a wheat smoothie that you could feed to your kids for nutritional reasons. It is not like the women that we now, reclaim it as the drink of goddesses. Like we were always drinking this. That's not true. Also claims that women were the ones to brew the beer as if hops magically appeared. Men were doing the farming, so it was a collaborative effort. Do we really want to play this like chicken and egg game of like where the beer came from? That's stupid. I think it also discounts that many of those bikini-clad women had a choice to pose for those. They made money. Are we going to sort of drag them out like Game of Thrones and shame them in the street? Like Meghan Markle then, Sofia Vergara, we have to take all of them and say, shame on you for posing for this bad shit is what they're calling it.
They made money, and it wasn't like they were slaves to it.
They chose to do this. And I feel like that's very condescending for anybody. Like we don't shame people for their bodies any longer. That's not a thing. The woke left goes out of their way not to do that. So why would we be shaming people for showing their bodies? Right. That's another side of the body shaming coin. Now, I was not actually able to find a donation website because I thought that I should take this one down, which is in my office based on this campaign. Because, we're not supposed to be objectifying bodies. This is not really my office. That's a joke. The point is, though, that this one was put out just last year. Miller Lite is not supposed to be objectifying bodies, right? But that one's okay. Why? Because this is part of Miller's Out and Proud campaign, which just launched last year. It erroneously, in my opinion, lumps gay people together with transgender people, something I've discussed at length, that I don't think these two groups are aligned at all. And it comes with a guidebook, a full-on guidebook. You can read it yourself, telling bars that serve Miller Lite how to be inclusive spaces for LGBTQ plus communities. Although the accompanying video is careful to educate you that these are the initialism letters we've got right now. We may add many more in the future, they are saying. Here's the guidebook. The guide features tips for bars to create safe spaces for these communities. One of them is not playing offensive music. I have to wonder what that means, if like music is eventually going to be overly gendered. David, I think you told me a story about like activists not liking the song Natural Woman, right? Aretha Franklin. Like, there is sort of wording in there that makes you think that these gendered, songs may eventually be considered something that bars shouldn't play. But they are more overt than that. Here's their section on gender inclusive bathrooms, saying that pretty much, any bar that has Miller Lite really should focus on gender inclusive bathrooms. They also say that the bar uniforms should not compromise gender identity as well. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was looking in Portland the other day for a bar to go to, and all of them said trans safe space and LGBTQ plus friendly. Like that was like the top of the thing. Like that was the most important thing. Then the description of the bar and all that stuff. And I'm just like, it's just becoming so prominent. And like, I don't, I just want to go have drinks and hang out. I don't care about all that stuff.
Jesus.
Yeah, I also notice it on Google Maps listings and
really?
What's the one my mom likes to go on and
Waze?
Not Waze.
I don't know.
Apple Maps?
No, the review. Oh, Yelp. My mom loves Yelp.
Yelp.
Yeah. Okay.
And I noticed that also is something that's prominently listed now in business listings. Now, it also says Miller is saying that, the bars that their beer is served in should not have uniforms that compromise people's gendered identity. And they should display this flag to make sure people know that it's a safe space. Now, I'm sure, how when you go into a bar, they have all kinds of tchotchke that say the beer brand, like that drainy thing that they put the cups on is always branded with like Hennessy or whatever. Or the towels have...
The coasters.
The coasters will have schnapps or whatever.
Schnapps.
What is the brand of...
Heineken.
When was the last time you were in a bar?
I know.
Hennessy, schnapps. These are well.
7 and 7, Seagram 7. That's something my dad used to drink. Do people drink that anymore?
I don't know.
7 and 7. Let me know in the chat.
I haven't been to like a college bar.
Okay. Anyway, so I'm thinking that because I know that bits and bobs around the bar are usually branded, that like certainly Miller Lite is going to come and give you this gender neutral open and proud sign, or you see this flag is the melding of the lesbian gay pride flag with the gender ideology flag. They are merged together, merged in all in one spot. Now, here's a guideline I found really interesting for transgender people who don't have the proper ID. Screw the state laws. Let's just let them in. Now, it says oftentimes, you need to let your bar staff know that if the person's ID does not match their current name or photo, then you have to be sensitive to that. You can't tell them no, even though the state law says they must have a matching ID. Instead, here's a little tip. Ask them their birthday to avoid unintentional disrespect. Now, if you are using a fake ID, not that I've ever done that, but I know that if you do that, you memorize the birthday, right? So then this is a nightmare. My father owns a bar in San Francisco Bay Area. It is a liability nightmare. Can you imagine now being told, don't be so hard and fast on those IDs? You can play wide and loose with those.
No, I was at the University of Pittsburgh, and I can clearly remember there was a bar right in Oakland where I went to the University of Pittsburgh, where it wasn't the night we were there or anything, but it was like another night, and there was a whole bunch of underage people that were there apparently, and whatever group comes in, I don't know what law enforcement. You guys know, maybe it's state to state. Who comes in and does the enforcement of it? Is it alcohol? It's not.
Yeah, because that's state to state. Because in Oregon, it's the OLCC, the Oregon
Liquor Control or whatever. Yeah. So I don't know what it is in Pennsylvania. Anyway, they came in and busted him. And if they found, I think it was like more than 3 violations of people being underage, they come in, they lock the doors, and they're like, "You're not getting out of here," because people try to jump out windows and stuff like that. And the bar went out of business. I mean, they were closed. They shut them down. So it's a huge liability. But this Miller Lite handbook is like, disregard looking at their.
You imagine
just because they might be trans.
That's why you have pictured IDs. It's like,
oh my God.
No more need for pictured IDs. Why do we even need pictures on them anymore?
Jesus.
I mean, yeah. And can you imagine a bar then being held liable for that? Like you go in and this agency is like, if we see more than 3 people whose IDs don't match, well, that's okay because they're transgender. Oh, well then as you were, that's okay.
That's fine.
And then if that's the case, then any ID should pass. Then, like my 11-year-old should be able to use mine. I'm 44, right? And vote or whatever. Like this is crazy. This is crazy talk. And of course, not all of these things are malintentioned, to be sure, but this is a beer company suggesting a reordering of society for stakeholder capitalism. They certainly seem to be advocating breaking the law around ID use.
Yeah.
So, this bad shit to good shit landing page has been removed, the ad that we showed you earlier, but the out and proud page where you can find this handbook for yourself is still live. You can go to millerlite.com/open-proud. You can see for yourself. I did not make this up. Now,
I just want to point out too how the campaign it's virtue signaling, because if you did the math, for the pounds of things that they said they were going to get, and they were going to divide it up between 200 breweries, each woman would have got a 50-pound bag of fertilizer. What is 50 pounds going to grow you as far as hops and all that? Like, it's kind of like, oh, thanks for this 50-pound bag of
right, and it's vermiculture.
Magazine.
It's not even like
chopped up with ink on it.
No. It's vermiculture. They said they're gonna give it to worms.
Oh, okay.
It's like
worm tea.
Yeah, and so the worms will eat the bikini pictures. Is if I'm understanding this correctly, they're going to compost it down, and the worms will eat it, and then it's the pee and poo of the worms that will create a compost that is very good. But I don't know if it's very good for worms to eat plastic posters.
Well, I was going to say they still secrete the chemical. Any chemical they intake, they're going to have to output. It's not like the chemicals just magically disappear because it's a worm body.
The only thing I could think of, because I do know a little bit about composting, is that it's the ashes, is that they burn it, which then gives me a headache about, burning plastic because of the fumes. So this is not a green initiative. No one's really thought this through. This is ridiculous. Miller Lite hasn't.
We have composting worms here, so we do put paper and things in there, but it's not inked paper.
Yeah.
Right. Do you put ashes?
Yes. So.
Yeah. We put ashes in our compost too, but we don't use worms. So anyway, that's that. It seems like Miller Lite is sticking to this. This campaign. And so if you think you're really sticking it to the man by not having a Bud Light and having a Miller Lite, you're not.
You're not. Raging Oracle in our chat says, you all reject this trash on the internet, but are too cowardly to reject it in person. This is why we losing. Raging Oracle says. No, I think it's a good it's because David was pointing out, and I think we were talking about when you go into these bars and you see this kind of stuff and you see this woke stuff, do you speak up about it in public, or is it just on the internet where we talk about it? Everyone, the thousands of people in our chat are upset about this. But when you go out into the world, do you let people know about this? Do you let the beer distributor where you're buying your beer say, I'm not buying this Bud Light anymore. Why are you stocking this stuff anymore? Or do you tell the bar that has all of this woke stuff on its walls that this is not helping?
Well, the thing is that boycotting is also practicing stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah, so not buying Bud Light and not buying Miller Lite, never watching Fox News again after they fired Tucker Carlson. These are all ways of showing stakeholder capitalism, right?
No.
Yeah,
these are all ways of
silent.
This is how capitalism works. This is all way of driving their stock into the ground.
Because you look at the number of it's a very small minority that does this stuff. And look at these little shops that'll there was a place that opened that did a 20% man tax. Well, they went out of business because they don't have a big enough clientele to keep it running. So you almost have to be, half into that world because you're going to lose a lot of business. I mean, Bud Light was the first time that ventured into people that didn't even discuss politics before, and all of a sudden it messed with their beer. And I went to a local small bar to play pool the other day, and these people were like, don't order Bud Light. They were taking that seriously. And now they're going to be saying, don't buy Miller Lite. So, that is a way to stop this stuff, is just by not buying stuff, boycotting it. You don't have to say something, go in there and tell people off.
Let me play devil's advocate, because transgender and, transgender advocates were upset with Disney because Disney didn't stop the Don't Say Gay bill. And so they were saying, we're going to boycott Disney until Disney gets involved. Isn't that boycott, participating in stakeholder capitalism? You're telling a company to do something, right? And so a boycott is stakeholder capitalism too, in a way, if you're out there saying no one should buy it. It is not if you're this doesn't speak to me, this upsets me, I don't buy it, right?
So if you're telling other people to boycott it.
If you're starting a campaign, you're also saying, I want this company to reorder society my way, right?
Right. So not be woke and left, but be, now I'm a cowboy and I drink beer.
Well, it's different. There's let's say that you have a hairdresser, you think he's racist. And you're I don't want to go to him anymore because I don't want to hear his racist joke. But if you tell everybody else and start a campaign about this, let's shut down his livelihood, let's change society, that's different. So there's, we have to accept responsibility for not wanting companies to do stakeholder capitalism, but then we can't do it either. We can't say, well, then everybody boycott and then we order society our way. It's about our individual choices. Here's an example. One of my children, has upcoming sex education in their school, and they wrote me about it. And I wrote back and said, I need to be assured that they will have sex education in single sex spaces if they are, because they did say they're separating the boys and the girls. And I needed to make sure that it was biological boys and girls, because I will not have one of my children put into sex education where they're teaching about their reproductive system as an optional part of their gender. I can't have that. And so I'm not saying everyone should boycott it. I'm not saying like what to do, but I will be the person who puts my money where my mouth is and tells the school this is important. And the school, was receptive to that and assured me that they are being separated by biological gender. So yeah, this is a fine line.
Let us know your thoughts on this. You guys can continue that debate in our chat. And it's a good question, and it's certainly worth having a discussion on.
I am curious if it does go this way. Would Queen Fat Bottom Girls be banned in those bars for non-offensive music when he was like an icon in that world? You know what I mean? Like,
great song.
Think about it. How far is it going to go?
Would Queen in general be banned in that bar?
Yeah,
that's a good question. We've got more news to get to. We're going to look at Canada. Canada is ready to pull the trigger on central bank digital currencies. That's right. Canada is getting ready for CBDC, and they put out a public survey, and it didn't go well. But Canada's moving forward with it, and they want to go cashless. So we're going to dive into what Canada is doing north of the border, because the United States is getting ready for their full rollout of the central bank digital currency and moving towards a digital U.S. dollar, and Europe is already moving towards it. So buckle your seatbelts, guys, in North America. But first, Peter Schiff today saying that we are heading for recession or depression 2.0. 2.0. So get ready for the Great Depression 2.0. And as we were just talking with Colonel McGregor a few minutes ago here on the show about what the BRICS nations are planning, which is, of course, in 81 countries showing up in St. Petersburg to discuss moving towards a gold-backed gold-backed currency, where the United States currency is falling down into the toilet. It's time to think about gold and precious metals in your portfolio. Natalie and I are big fans of investing in gold and silver. And last year was terrible for investors. 2023 could really be worse, and we could be heading into a massive recession. That is, unless you start investing in gold and silver to protect yourself from losses. So here's what you need to do. Our friends at Lear Capital can help you get started purchasing precious metals or converting part of your IRA or your 401k into a gold and silver IRA. Call Lear Capital today at 1-800-613-3557 or go to learredacted.com. And right now, they're actually giving away $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase. $15,000 in free bonus metals with a qualified purchase. So call 1-800-613-3557 or go to learredacted.com. Well, Canada is seeking to roll out a central bank digital currency. And right now, it's sort of an open period where they're asking the public for feedback on a central bank digital currency. How is this going right now? This public period where they want feedback from its citizens? Well, the answer is it's not going very well. Dan Cohen, our Washington correspondent from Redacted, joins us now to dive deeper into the story. So, Dan, I'm surprised that the public is not really taking to the idea of total surveillance currency in Canada.
A total shocker. I don't know how the Canadians couldn't go for this, Clayton, but yeah, so the Bank of Canada rolled out a survey this week saying that it's seeking public input on digital currency. Watch the video that goes along with it.
Here at the Bank of Canada, we're exploring the possibility of issuing a digital version of cash. Not to replace cash, but to ensure Canadians always have access to a safe, stable, and official payment option in an increasingly digital world. You may be thinking, I don't need a digital Canadian dollar right now, and you'd be right, but Canadians may need one in the future. So the bank has to be ready if and when Parliament makes that decision. Part of being ready is hearing from you. Your input will help us make choices about the design of our digital dollar, ensuring it's convenient, easy to use, and meets your needs. So please head over to our website and fill in our survey.
So that was Senior Deputy Governor Carolyn Rogers. And, first of all, note that she says that this CBDC is not a replacement for cash. Now, that's false. Here is the Atlantic Council's description of Canada's CBDC project. Quote, as per the BOC, that's the Bank of Canada, the BOC's 2020 paper, the primary motivations for issuing a CBDC would be a sufficiently cashless economy, which could make the use of the Canadian dollar in its physical form limited. So that is totally false from that deputy governor in Canada, and who's promoting this survey. So they actually put the survey on Twitter, and it's pretty glorious. The responses are, as you can imagine, overwhelmingly negative. Turns out Canadians do not want a CBDC, or at least according to this government survey. Check these out. We have Ann Roll, who says, I have a digital dollar. I have my bank card, Visa, Visa debit, PayPal, Apple Wallet, Apple iPhone, Apple Watch. I also carry cash in my wallet. Big fat no from me. Then we have Aileen Osorio says, definitely not. Voting against the digital Canadian dollar. I'm not okay with surveillance and having my money canceled at the whim of the government. And then she says, also not sure what the benefits are, given it still loses purchasing power. So, I mean, I think those are great points. We saw what happened with the Canadian truckers when they protested against vaccine mandates. Well, their accounts were frozen for engaging in peaceful protest.
Yeah, and we should point out that when people tried to donate money to those individuals, that money was also frozen. So GoFundMe accounts and Venmo and PayPal and all sorts of things were taken away from these people. And it's refreshing to hear the idea, of course, that this would, I mean, we know that the plan is to replace cash. We know this from the World Economic Forum. The plan is to, get rid of cash. So it is heartening to hear these Canadian citizens aware of this process, that this is the first stage. Removing cash out of the society is the next step in this process.
Exactly. I mean, Canadians are aware of what's going on. They're not as dumb as that politician would like to think. This is a great comment along those lines from It's IGC. He says, if you think the government freezing bank accounts was easy before, just wait if this hits. I like this one. Say your piece to the central bankers who want to give us willingly accept the panopticon upon us. Kind of strange grammar aside, the use of panopticon, I think that's a perfect way to describe the CBD system. If you're not familiar with the panopticon, it's a circular prison with a single guard tower in the center. So it requires basically minimal or no effort from the guards, and the prisoners are completely isolated from each other and feel like they're being constantly surveilled, and they have no privacy. So it's a really good analogy.
Right. When every transaction is cataloged, every movement you make, right? Every transaction you have. And of course, I know there's people to say that this conspiracy theory about canceling or sunsetting money, this idea that money would sunset at a certain time or that it would expire. And in the United States, the Fed Now program, the Fed has specifically written this out on their website, talking about the power of sunsetting money so that they could be used for stimulus. Maybe in this, let's say Calgary needs stimulus money. They could, infuse a whole bunch of cash into Calgary at a certain point, and they have a month and a half to use it to provide some sort of stimulus for that town. And then after that amount of time, it goes off and it's shut down. The money can be shut down. Same thing in China. China has set this up as well. So there is precedent for the idea of expiring capital. Let's all remember that.
Exactly. This might be the best comment, I think. So James Dueck says, this public consultation is phony. You already know that few Canadians would willingly agree to a CBDC. You're using the survey to propagandize the public. Shame on you, Bank of Canada, with 2 exclamation points. So I think that's correct, that this survey, well, it's already decided that they want to roll out this CBDC. They're trying to do it. I think they're trying to gauge the temperature, get a check on how the public is going to react to this and try to promote it. But that's spectacularly backfiring. Watch. This is a key statement from Canadian Senator Colin Deacon, who he's promoting digital ID, which of course goes hand in hand with the CBDC. And this digital ID he wants is based on DIA. DIA is the digital ID that has been implemented in Ukraine, which we've reported on extensively here at Redacted. You can go watch our reports on that. So watch this statement from Colin Deacon.
one of the most important things that Slava said was right up front when he said, nobody was asking for this. I often think about one of my granddaughters. She didn't like ice cream, and she wasn't asking for ice cream until she tried it. We've got to get political leadership on this, because the Canadians' choice right now in Canada is to have a more cumbersome, slower, more expensive access to public services than what DIA is enabling in Ukraine. And I think Slava said some very important things. Getting the enabling legislation in place is as important as the technology, and often more difficult than the technology.
Wow, I find that really insulting. That's like saying, he's trying to make this sort of horse and buggy car analogy. Well, you're stuck with these horse and buggies. Wait till you drive the car. And this is how it's all wrapped up, isn't it? It's all wrapped up in the idea of convenience. And you will love it because it's so convenient. You won't ever have to worry about cash. You won't ever have to worry about your wallet. It's all there, right, available to you. And, hey, biometrically, you'll just be able to scan your face and go to the grocery store. You don't even need to bring a wallet. We'll just scan your retina, and it'll come right out of your account. It's all about convenience, you stupid Canadians. You don't know how good this could be.
Yeah, I love the shift from it's all about convenience, everyone, to like as soon as people are like, I don't really want to go along with this. I like having my personal sovereignty and freedom and ability to make my own decisions. And then it's like, get in line, idiot. You're a stupid child who needs to be told what to do. So it happens real fast. These politicians think that you are small children, that you Canadians are small children that can't make decisions for themselves. And if this if this survey is any indication, Canada's plans for CBDCs are coming, but it looks like there's going to be resistance.
We'll just see how tough the Canadian resistance can be. I mean, Canadians are, very, very nice people. I know that one guy used 2 exclamation marks to describe it. Let's hope that they stand up to this kind of tyranny, because I really think, as Catherine Austin Fitts points out, it's sort of like a corral. When the CBDCs is like the closing in. When you wrap people around in this corral, the CBDCs, this surveillance state, is closing in on people. And we saw in Europe just a few weeks ago, Christine Lagarde at the European Central Bank gloating that we now have a threshold of the amount of cash that you're able to spend in the European Union. If you go above a certain threshold, I think it was 1,000 euros. If you spend more than that in cash, you're then considered basically on the gray market, as she described it. Basically, you're a threat. You could be construed as a terrorist by using cash more than a certain threshold. So you don't want to do that. They want to get it down to like 300 euro. That's all you could ever use to pay cash. Like if you wanted to pay the gardener or anything like that or whatever, and you didn't want to have to put it on a credit card or all of that. So this is where we're headed, folks. And I hope that Canadians are aware of just this type of tyranny that's unfolding before them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we in the United States, this is coming for us too. DIA is a U.S. project. I mean, they're talking about central bank digital currencies here too. So, Ukraine is a laboratory. We've showed that for digital ID, for CBDCs, for the fourth industrial revolution in general, and all of its various components. And what happens in Ukraine, not only in Ukraine, but as we see in this report, that they want to import that DIA project into Canada. Well, that's coming to the United States too. So everyone be aware.
Buckle up, North America. Dan Cohen, thank you so much for covering this story. Canada, stay strong up there. Our friends to the north. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone for subscribing. I know a lot of people said, "Oh my gosh, you guys!" A lot of people subscribed overnight and said, "Wow, your subscriber numbers went up a lot overnight." So thank you very much. I really appreciate that. We're closing in on 2 million subscribers on YouTube, closing in on 330,000 on Rumble. And someone in the Rumble chat just now said, "Hey, there's 17,000 people watching on Rumble right now and only 1,000 likes. Can you guys hit that like button?" And the same thing is true on YouTube. If you guys would be so kind as to subscribe to the channel and smash that like button, it really helps push us further out in the algorithm and hopefully try to enlighten people that are stuck in the mainstream media world of their news, and they think that's the gospel truth, like CNN and MSNBC and all that garbage. Yeah. So please subscribe to the channel and make us a part of your day. We're here live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern time. That's when we do the show, Monday through Thursday, live here at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll be back here tomorrow at the same bat time, same bat channel.
Indeed, we will. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Have a great night.